have you play it at 11 and a half minutes. And
Hello,
then
welcome back to Week in Review with one and only Doovid. We're just getting the drum music set up, and the show is now live. Thank you to everyone for joining. Very excited to be here this week with my unique co-host Doovid, and we'll be handing the floor over to him to do the introduction.
awesome. Hello, Jennifer. Hello, everybody, Entropists. And this weekend was the Hebrew New Year's. So, pretty exciting. Happy New Year's, everybody. The traditional Hebrew blessing is may you be written into the book of life for peace and prosperity, health. You could add a whole list of beneficial things that we might bless upon each other. So Happy New Year's. And, we discussed already last year the basic theology of some sort of dualistic, impersonal God in a spiritual realm that on this given holiday sits in judgment and decides the fate of all of humanity, all of creation. And the prayers, very interesting, in that vein, some of the very interesting prayers and heartfelt prayers, nice tunes. I actually didn't go to synagogue because of the COVID-19, and you just didn't really make sense. I just prayed by myself. Well, I did take the prayers pretty seriously. I spent even a good 2, 3, maybe more hours yesterday and today chanting Hebrew prayers, and I felt good about it. It felt pretty spiritual, different. Just kind of bunkered down in my house saying all the prayers as opposed to being part of a community. If you think about, the prayers are essentially to connect yourself to God, not necessarily to the community, although there is that element, but felt pretty good. So I thought I'd have Jennifer play a clip of possibly one of the most famous Hasidic tunes ever, and this is actually from the Yom Kippur, 10 days from now, the Day of Judgment, in the prayers at the very end, where judgment is just coming, the last minutes before the gates of judgment close. And in the Hebrew folklore, there's certain mantras that you could say that affect the spiritual realms and arouse God's mercy. And, so the peak high holiday prayer services are these, mantras, the 13 divine attributes of God's name. And, that in theory is, the most powerful mantra that could be uttered by the human mouth, and the most righteous, opportune time where God judges all of humanity.
Would you like me to go live to that? I can play a couple minutes. The whole clip is 21 minutes. So do you want me to play the first 2 minutes of it?
No, I'll be playing in the center. So let me just briefly. This was a famous rabbi in Europe. He might have even been in Berlin, and during World War I, and he had some sort of surgery. It was a talented musical prayer leading rabbi. Mudgets was the name, and he had a surgery. And according to the legend, they asked me about an anesthetic, and he said no. And during the surgery, which lasted like 20 some minutes, he composed this song, and the words of the song are from the last minute when the judgment upon the world is about to be sealed. And the words are Ezra Elohim v'Amaya, remember God and wonder, Proisikal Ir Tila Benaya, that and see the glorious city built up upon us. V'ir Elohim Mishafelis Achio Taktia, as where the city of God, meaning Jerusalem, has fallen to the furthest depths of hell. Ubakal Zois Yanenu Baka. But even though this, we still hope to God. So this is like the ultimate oy vey, like tens of minutes of oy vey, and it's the ultimate like I don't care, like everything I do is to rebuild God's city in Jerusalem. Like yes, like Roseanne Barr and her story, and it's like yes, everything she did was so that she could leverage that power one day to rebuild the city of Jerusalem. So this is like the ultimate like oy vey mourning over Jerusalem, but also opportune, time the day of judgment. Thinking like one day Jerusalem will be the capital of the world again. So if you want to play it like it may be like at like 11 minutes 45 seconds into it for like a minute and a half, and then after that. Um, at the end part at about at 1840. So you put it like 11:30 and let it play for like 2 minutes, and then you fast forward to like 1840.
Is that a good spot to wrap it up?
Yeah,
Thanks
that's
for sharing.
a great famous tune, and obviously a long tune. I actually sang that song um, with Rabbi Moshe Wolfson, who was one of the main non-Chabad students of the Lubavitch Rebbe. The tune we did the other week of the Lubavitch Rebbe, but the Lubavitch Rebbe obviously was head of a sect that was already at its height from multi generations, and had tens of thousands of so to say hereditary members that he was able to train thousands of rabbis, but he also trained a handful of rabbis from different sects, and one of them was the man who was singing in that video, Ben Zion Chenker, who passed away. Another is the famous Rav Shlomo Carlebach, who Jews would probably have heard of him. And another is this man, Rav Moshe Wolfson, who has a synagogue in Brooklyn, Amunas Yisrael, and I've served. And he used to go to Israel for 3 weeks, in the 6 weeks in the summer, and would pray at the Kotel. And we sang that song at the Western Wall at the temple. And I remember, like, I was young, like that was like the pinnacle, like to know, that tune to that mantra from this famous rabbi and that story. But it's a beautiful chant, and think the power of the day, the power of the mantra, and to try to beautify such a concept that even thinking Roseanne Barr, we'll talk about my week in review, that my interesting karma, that I get to speak to Roseanne Barr, that this guy Lowell. So I gotta check his name, his full name. So it's slipping me. Um, Lowell Joseph Gallen, who Twittered me from an appearance on Adam Green that I responded to, and then we became friends on Facebook. And he has a show with Roseanne, and we had played that clips a few months ago where he did a shout out to me for my appearance on Adam Green. So eventually I was on a show with Roseanne, and it was Roseanne telling like her Lithuanian Jewish heritage. And so we'll probably talk about that more. So I did a chess stream also, just like an impromptu, playing some chess, and I actually got 2 of my crowns back of the 2 variants I play. I started playing a little bit again, and I got into the top 100 in Horde and Crazy House. So Doooovid, world competitor at chess variants, is now in the top 100 in the world at 2 different variants, chess variants.
Nice. Sounds very exciting. Yeah, I've got your Roseanne clip all ready to go here. I don't know if you want to give that a bit of time before we watch it or what, but I thought it was pretty cool. Like Doovid looked a little starstruck when he got on there. It's kind of adorable. I know I used to watch that show when I was a kid. And
yeah, I think it was a little karmatic that it was like obviously Roseanne's a famous person, and she's involved ironically now, like in internationally Jewry at like its highest level somewhat. Like she's like largely like a face of Judaism. Not that she's like she actually might be somewhat of a Jewish scholar and various things. So and she's very dedicated to like the temple, rebuilding the temple. And ironically, we even know some of the same people, like Rabbi Boteach, Sheldon Adelson, like Roseanne Barr is in the entourage of Sheldon Adelson and Donald Trump. Ironically, that's my karma. We're trying to encourage. We got 5 viewers now, so we talk about that more, but about producing good content and getting more viewership. But it was a good sign that someone reached out, inviting me on the show, and it was an area that I had some knowledge on. That where she was telling kind of like basically, I was a Jew, I was raised as a Jew. She kind of converted to Mormonism briefly. She told some interesting story where she had an injury in some sort of palsy and a facial muscle she couldn't move, and the rabbis all prayed for her and it didn't work, and then the Mormon priest prayed for her and it worked. And it's like her and her mother like started going to the Mormon church, and then years later she thinks she found out that actually it was a thing that usually goes away after a period of time. So it wasn't like the rabbi's prayers didn't work and the Mormon priest did. It was just a function of time. But she wasn't. It's the interesting factor of like, was she essentially Jewing the whole time for a greater purpose and from a spiritual purpose, from like her own understanding, not necessarily like the greater karmic understanding, but her own journey, understanding like what does it mean to be like a Jew who moves from Europe into Salt Lake City and somewhat hides their Judaism, becomes very famous, and then uses that fame and leverages it to benefit Israel. And and to say that's not um, an uncommon phenomenon. Saying that's like like from the debates I've been in our streaming, like of course, like that's we know that's what people do. Saying even that like that's what I do. That's what like the song I sung. Saying like yes, I'm sitting here mourning over that Jerusalem's not built up. Like I should be living in a built up Jerusalem, but instead I'm here in Detroit, and it's like well yeah, that's my religion. Of course I believe that way. So it's interesting to see like Roseanne Barr and her level and just to speak and yeah, but I thought the karma level of me like was someone like that I knew, so to say, not like I knew Roseanne Barr, but saying like, yeah, I did watch your show for years as a kid when I was just like, whatever, like a loser teenager. I watched a lot of TV, and I watched Roseanne, probably every single episode, and so it's just interesting. Like now I'm streaming. It's like, who am I going to talk to? It's like Roseanne Barr, and it's like
Oh my
ironic.
god, that's true. I wasn't allowed to watch TV. I was only allowed to watch half an hour a day. So we usually watched Reboot. But whenever we were at our friends' houses, I had a friend named Veronica Mosier. Does that sound like a Jewish name to you? Because I definitely recall watching Roseanne over at her house.
No, I mean Veronica's unlikely to be Jewish. I mean, it's possible it could be a Jew named Veronica, but Veronica probably not a Jewish name. But I mean, it doesn't matter anyway. We're just on the stream. We need to be giving names to your childhood friends or whatever. But
Well, it's a pretty unusual name, and don't
but
think
it's saying like yeah, I mean,
we're not even giving the spelling, so
tens of millions of people watched Roseanne,
that's true.
and it was one of the most popular shows in America for years. And when it came back, it was going to be the most popular show in America until they canceled it because of her, so to say, God forbid, racist comment against Valerie Jarrett, President Obama's former advisor, that somewhat ended her career. And like I guess she'd even ran for president in 2012, and she may have even got a few million votes. It wasn't competitive, but she may have. But yeah, I mean, she built this character, and the character wasn't necessarily Jewish. I mean, her name was Roseanne Barr, and she said Barr is a shortening of like a Eastern European Jewish name, like Barskovsky or something, or that they just shortened it to Bar. And she never pretended like she wasn't Jewish, but the character wasn't necessarily Jewish, and most people probably didn't know she was Jewish unless you know Jews. So like I know Jews. Like to me, like obviously she was a Jew. Brundle was mentioning also he didn't know she was Jewish, but then also meant like an age thing that at a younger age you may not know the difference. In an older age you may start telling the difference. And but I mean that's a pretty common thing. Like like a Jew coming from Europe into America, hiding their Judaism, getting into acting, and then eventually rediscovering their Judaism and leveraging that for the purpose of Israel is a very known common thing. Like right, you've heard that pattern like hundreds of times just in your time on the internet, right?
Well, I guess when people get older, they think about their legacy, right? So, yeah, I've definitely heard of it happening, and yeah, it's common enough to be an
Even
archetype.
from counter Semites, you hear like arguments like it's a bad thing. It's like what we
Counter
weren't really.
Semites say it's a bad thing.
What it's like is like you weren't really friends. The whole time you were just using me to build up power so you could leverage it to build up Jerusalem. I mean, you don't have your long term, your
Well, no, I
hearts.
mean, I don't look. I mean, I look at it like I love India, you know. So it's like I get it. So I don't feel like it's mutually exclusive to support your homeland and your colonial land or whatever you want to call it. Like, I don't think it's a contradiction, so I get it.
Well,
It's a legacy thing, right? It's not a
well, obviously
anti-American thing. It's a pro-Israel thing.
That's why we're streaming episode 73, because we largely agree on this issue.
Well, it would be. I mean, what's the counter position? Have no loyalty to anything. That's essentially the position that the leftists are taking. To have no loyalty to anything except the ideology.
Well, no, I'm saying that that the general alt-right or something would be like, if that's the case, like I should pack up and move to Israel, or like the dual loyalty.
Okay.
I mean, the general case of dual loyalty, where you say like, what the hell, like Roseanne Barr, like I watched you as a kid, like you were my mom on TV, and you're telling me like you're really a Jew, and now you want to leverage everything that you did for the benefit of a different country. And it's like, of course. But you're saying, okay, is there anything intrinsically wrong with that? And then to call it out, and then to say like, okay, like, well, what about this, this other Jew, who is like, are they going to do that too one day? And it doesn't have to be a Jew; it could be anybody. The question of dual loyalty, and then from the question of Jewish theology to say like, well, yes, of course, that's how the Bible predicts it's going to happen. So that whether there's like a question of counter-Semites or not, saying the prophecy is the prophecy, and that's why there's world religions built around these prophecies. But I mean, did you listen to her whole story?
I was only interested in the bit that you were on. I'm sorry. She sounded like just the monologuing and everything. It was like kind of boring. It was cute to see you get all excited though.
Yeah, I mean, because I guess like you just don't care about Jewish history.
I mean,
in the way like her story.
Not the way I care about Indian history, but history as a subject is interesting, or can be. But we're not talking about Jewish history. We're talking about her own personal story, and it was unrelatable, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just saying that however, she ended up in Salt Lake City, that her grandparents and her parents, and they had enough savings to buy a building in Salt Lake City, and then after the war, or during the war, they filled up the building with as many people as they could of Jews from Europe in Salt Lake City, and then largely they blended in with Mormons. So internally, inside their the building her grandparents owned, there was like a shtetl of Jewry, where she was like the little entertainment angel who performed at Jewish meals and sang songs and everything. Hence how she ends up in entertainment. But at the same time, outside of like the little shtetl of the apartment building her grandparents had owned, she basically didn't follow Judaism, even spent a period of time as a Mormon, and was never that religiously Jewish, besides like the Sabbath or whatever ritual she had been brought up with. But that was enough to instill in her, and also like the memory, God forbid, like the Holocaust and the suffering and the stories, that imprinted on her some level of Jewish consciousness that she held through, that whatever, even though she wasn't a Jewish scholar, that she herself felt like she was giving over the essence of Judaism through her acting. And then when she becomes famous, through this character she created, that was basically like kind of about love, and largely all family sitcoms where people just go through the troubles of regular daily life and family grind, but at the end of the day, like everyone says I love you, and the family holds together. So it's like a learning Masonic play type way for people to learn about how to deal with the most common problems facing society, that Roseanne becomes this great teacher of these things and talking about these issues, but her comeback is too controversial. And when she's given such a pulpit and a platform, so to say, her Jewing becomes uncontrollable, where she got canceled because, like, she's like, oh, Valerie Jarrett is an enemy of Israel, God forbid. She's supporting Iran, and Iran's an enemy of Israel, so she's using her fame to attack Valerie Jarrett, and she does so in a way that's considered racist, and she largely got canceled to the point where Adam Green gets more viewers than Roseanne, who I think had as many as 20 million people watching her show. Almost, whenever, like, 2.5 years ago for the pilot episode, it was almost 20 million people, tuned in, viewed to see that, and then it got canceled, and now she gets like 5 to 15,000 views on YouTube.
Wow. I don't even know if I remember that originally happening. Now, it's sort of like when she originally got canceled, like, I'm trying to remember. It's like I got to clear away the dusty cobwebs, see if I can access that memory. Is
It
that
was the
really what
biggest
happened though?
news story
The
in
show was
American
doing
culture.
well, and then she was unceremoniously canceled because she said something about someone associated with Obama. Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, this was, generally, I mean, one of the biggest news stories in American media for a brief period of time, and there was, people on the news demanding her cancel. But yeah, it was. But I'm saying it was basically over Israel. But it was her criticism of a former Obama official in a way that was considered racist, and her character was generally, she had not politically correct, and obviously the rebirth of her character that was going to make it one of the most interesting shows in America was that she was going to be this unpolitically correct
Yeah, she's kind
um,
of a groiper,
Trump,
isn't she?
Trump supporter.
She's kind of a groiper, isn't she?
I mean, possibly, but I mean, no, I mean, she's one of the most famous women in America. So I mean, saying, like, you could say, like, she might be like a queen of the groypers or something, like the groypers at the end of the day. The
Yeah.
only girl, the only girl in their circles is Roseanne Barr, who's now 70 years old. But I mean, so no, I mean, like, obviously she's one of the most famous people in America. I mean, she even ran for president, got a few million votes. But the decline, like the ruin of cancel culture, that she's probably been reduced to a small time millionaire, and and the YouTube show that sometime, it gets around 10,000 views.
Oh my God, Quebecois foie gras said something horrible about Roseanne. I
Well, I mean, she was playing your kind of like blue collar American dream. I mean, it was basically those sitcoms like the 80s and 90s, are before the crash of 2008. Really, the financial crisis of 2008 is almost like a permanent end of the American dream. The kind of idea of having a house in suburban, and, having the former outline of the American dream, and then the housing crisis 2008, that it's no longer seen in the same way, the stability or the general goal in building that up. But so the sitcom era that doesn't exist anymore is this kind of blue collar suburban family that struggles, um, and has a lot of problems and deals with difficulties, but it's funny, and the family sticks together, and at the end of the day, they pull through and are relatively an example of the American dream.
so
And they
basically
all,
The Simpsons.
well, even Seinfeld, really all sitcoms are basically like that, selling the American dream. So Seinfeld and Friends are already a return to urbanism. I'm relating like some pivotal event like the 2008 financial crisis. And really there's a reboot like from the Honeymooners to where we go out to suburbia. So the original sitcoms were all urban, and then you have the growth of suburbia like through the 50s, 60s, 70s, that almost all television occurs in the suburbs. And
What
almost,
about Archie Bunker?
well, he's already in the suburbs also because
Okay.
that's in the 70s. But I mean, the Honeymooners is like in the 40s, and that's an urban area. But the growth of the suburbs in America occurs after World War II in like the 50s and into like the 90s, where people are still into the 90s. People are still leaving the cities for the suburbs, and then by 2008, um, the trend had already reached its zenith and had exploded, and you have a return to suburbia. But like Friends and Seinfeld already like in the 90s, people are returning to suburbia. And so Roseanne is already like in the 80s and 90s. And so that's already kind of like the decline of suburbia, like the original, like Leave It to Beaver, your classic 50s shows where it's kind of like pleasant and nice and manners, into like the 70s to the 80s. And you get, Sarah Gilbert, a Jew, and Roseanne, who are kind of these kind of like potty mouth, um, disgruntled Americans. It was like the 80s and 90s, and so it was a sign of the times in the era to have these characters like Roseanne and Sarah Gilbert defining suburban generation that you probably did have a decent mixture of Jews and Gentiles, but was largely white. Although the whiteness has changed, it disappears then. So now we have the reboot of it. It was going to be like everybody now. There's homosexuals and intermarriage with African Americans and different races and all these various things, and that make it kind of
United
like
Colors of Benetton type deal.
what we're going to portray as the new modern American family. And to some extent, it is the current reality of modern suburbia, that your average person in modern suburbia, like, does have these like mixed, multiracial, broken families with divorces and remarriages and these various things that are demonstrated through these sitcoms by millions of people turn into the sitcom. But it's still a selling of the American dream, where it's like, okay, the system works. So it's like, okay, even though now maybe you have like gay marriage and all these various things, but still it's like everyone loves each other and you go to work tomorrow and believe in the country and believe in the system. And so basically all sitcoms sell that same thing. And Roseanne at this point was just too controversial, but it's interesting. She was too controversial for being too pro-Trump. And so underground, she still might be somewhat of an important figure in the Trump scene. However, as a public figure, she's basically been reduced to nothing. And it's, so you see the power of the media and the power of, left wing, even a Jew, um, like Roseanne could largely be destroyed by cancel culture to this point where she's, just kind of talking about her Jewish heritage, where she's like, okay, she made her money, she's out. She actually lives in Hawaii, but she's saying, okay, like whatever, she did her thing, and now she wants to focus on having the temple in Jerusalem rebuilt, and it's saying because she's a Jew, and that's what Jews do.
Yep. People want to leave a legacy, and I think it sort of becomes a louder and louder voice as you get older.
It's not your legacy. So you're saying like,
I said people want to leave a legacy, just generally.
But it's saying that the ultimate legacy, like if you're a Jew, is it's going to be the temple. You'd be like, no, like let's do it. Let's rebuild this thing. And it's saying like if you're not a Jew, like you just don't care. Like what the hell? Who cares? Like you're really going to try to sell me on like rebuilding some ancient temple so you could do like animal sacrifices in a place that would like almost definitely cause a war to even consider it. You're like, yes, of course. And you're saying like, yes,
It's a
Roseanne.
mystery. It's a mystery to me, Doovid. So I do appreciate you sharing these insights.
Well, I mean, it's not a mystery; it's a religion. So like,
Well, it's a
Doovid.
mystery to me. Let's put it that way.
Well, I mean, it's a mystery to understand Judaism and to understand that like Roseanne and Doovid both have somewhat a similar understanding of Judaism.
Yeah, I got that feeling when I was
Even
watching.
though we never met. I never met her. And it's like I'm a guy who watched her show as a kid. And like at this point, I may be more relevant in like rebuilding the temple than she is. Like, she's in Hawaii and she's an older woman and she may have not dedicated her time as much to Judaism as Duvid did. And so, could be in the greater realm, even with all her celebrity, that like she probably has done quite a bit for Judaism and Israel. And so that our paths would cross is just interesting karma. Think like, okay, like, Duvid, a guy who dedicated my life to Judaism. And you think like Roseanne Barr, she's not a person who dedicated her life to Judaism. She's just a Jew who became very successful. But in the end of her days, she spent at least a decade leveraging that celebrity for the benefit of Israel and larger Jewish causes.
Well, I guess it's more likely to have a lasting legacy, isn't it?
Well, I mean, so if you're a Jew, that's the type of legacy that she would be proud of. So saying that if your audience there is like, no, I mean, that's not like, I'm not like, my legacy is not going to be like a plaque on King Solomon's temple. I'm trying to leave some different legacy than that. And like, but yeah, there's the the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and say like, yeah, everyone has a desire to leave a legacy, and then it's a question of what type of legacy, and then maybe a boundary condition of free will, where it's based somewhat on your ethnic biological heritage of what type of legacy you're going to leave, even if it's a transmigration of soul or various understanding that a legacy, there's no like universally recognized positive sort of legacy, and what might be a positive legacy towards one person, you very likely is going to be a negative legacy towards another group.
Well, sure. Sure, it's ultimately up to other people to remember the legacy. So that's what you have to keep in mind when you're leaving it, and hope that they can carry the torch and hope that it goes far enough. But I mean, it's a gamble, right? Because you're presumably dead when you're talking about, well, not dead, but you're thinking about your death more when you're doing legacy planning. Aiken Drum
Well,
says Robert Maxwell left a legacy. Yeah, like some of these people in physics, maybe they aren't remembered by mainstream, but they will leave a legacy of some sort, and then they'll eventually be remembered. So it's like, why remember people usually for big contributions to an overall narrative?
yeah, I mean, so if you're part of a Judeo belief system and you think like the whole creator of the material realm has a certain mission and purpose of creation that we're part of, and somehow that's the diaspora and ingathering of the Jews and the destruction and rebuilding of this temple, and within the structure as a believing Jew, you say like, yeah, I mean, it hinges upon at some point the rebuilding of the structure in Jerusalem, and like all of the texts and prayers and sages of generations, like all basically say the same thing, that it's going to hinge upon this structure in Jerusalem. And I think Luke Ford is kind of coming around to that in terms of like the multiple truth hypothesis type thing, that like, yeah, I mean, you subscribe to a system, you could still be a rationalist and a scientist and say like, I use logic, even though a person might have axioms of a largely fallacious system, that it works on enough of a level that I say, yeah, I mean, generally I subscribe to the tenets of Judaism, and within that, there's kind of like a goal and purpose. And so, like, if you're like a really, 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 really good Jew, like you would rebuild the temple. And so, like, obviously, there is, like the best Jew hasn't happened because the temple hasn't been rebuilt. So we're still waiting for this messianic figure. And so all Jews are on this, messianic quest. And in theory, you could just, karma could be like Doovid and Roseanne. You're just two incarnations of some previous Jewish souls that are largely corresponding together for this larger mission of rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem, or the fulfillment of messianic Jewish prophecies. And so if in my head and Roseanne's head, and actually quite a few people, like relatively from some level, that man Les Glassman, he has thousands of videos on Judaism. He's South African. This guy Lowell Joseph is in Jerusalem. So I'm saying Roseanne is just the famous Jew, but that guy Les Glassman is a prolific streamer and scholar of Judaism. And Lowell Joseph, he's a pretty connected Jew. I saw he had like the head of um, some organization and various streams. So I'm glad he reached out. I was glad to get on the show, and it was interesting to hear Roseanne's story and to get to ask a question, and even kind of like psychoanalyze from a spiritual level. And she said like she's seen like 3,000 psychiatrists. She met like all the top Kabbalists, and after the stream we spoke even a little bit more. And I asked her if she thought she'd like resolved her karma, and she thought she had like she thought it made sense to her, I guess, like why her soul entered her body and had the trajectory it did, and whether she like she said, she's like she did her job. She feels like she understood why her soul entered her body, what mission it had, specifically her soul becoming Roseanne Barr to her, where she could say, I did my job, I did my best. She fulfilled her purpose.
Did you want me to play the clip of you on there?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know how long you want me to go on for, but because it was never clear to me when you got off. Like, did you just stay on right through to the end?
Well, no, I'm just there for like 2-3 minutes tops,
Okay.
and that's it. Like I was on the call the whole time,
Today
but the video
they
only shows
lost so
the
much.
person speaking. So at like 40 minutes, I get my question, and I actually get like a back and forth. I think like 3 times, where I even like she says something and I say something, she says something and I say something, and then that's the end of me for the end of the stream. And maybe I butt in once later when she was talking, because I was like, yes, I'm a civil engineer, and all underground water is connected, because she was talking about like bathing in mikvahs, and so like I butt on for like 10 seconds to back up that like what she's saying about spiritual waters is scientifically valid also, but you don't have to try to find that.
There was a question in the chat before I go with this video, whether you consider the Book of Revelations to be Kabbalistic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. In my opinion, that doesn't matter. I mean, there's so many scholars and sages, and obviously the Hebrew sages don't recognize the Book of Revelation as having any validity at all.
My family were rabbis and cantors from way, way back, all the way back. We're always rabbis and cantors. So, yeah, people lose a lot when they get rid of their Jews.
So, Roseanne, do you mind if we open up the forum to anyone who wants to ask any
I love it.
or comments?
I love it. I wanted to show your granddaughter that I've got an apron, Wonder Woman apron. I wanted her to see it, but anyway.
Okay, so David, if you can unmute. So we have David Colton.
Yeah, real honor to hear your story, Roseanne. I was thinking because after I finished high school, I basically dedicated my life to Judaism, went to Israel, studied under famous rabbis, and but I remember as a kid, the Roseanne, like I grew up with you in my living room, and a lot of these lessons, thinking like why karmatically is it that I learned these lessons from Roseanne Barr, not from the Rebbe, not from the rabbi. You know, I had to go to Israel. I had to do years and years of research to, study Judaism, enroll in yeshiva. But, Roseanne Barr was broadcasted straight into my living room and taught me these messages. So, it was really fascinating then thinking about Hasidus and your kind of story that maybe there was some sort of spiritual energy that, chose you to be this great teacher of Judaism, or something. Even it's almost mind-boggling. Just my experience, that my first experiences from Judaism was, as a kid, like Roseanne, she's really a Jew.
Yeah, well, that's why I went into television. Also, when I saw that, well, I always knew that I was going to be a link in a long chain. I hate to use the word teacher or any of that stuff because that always has ego in it. But I knew I was going to be a link in a long chain, and so very proud is that a weird word, but I think I did what I was supposed to do. And it was always a message of Judaism, definitely. Some people won't want to hear that, but Judaism is a great religion of love and of unity, and of loving your fellow as you love yourself. So that was always the message I tried to put across. But thank you so much for getting it and saying it.
Yeah, I believe in your book phenomenon. Just listening to you was I kept on thinking, Tanya and all the different Hasidus things that you possibly could have explained, why Hashem would have put you there, and only because you were put in that situation were you able to accomplish what you accomplished. So like, if a person was given the perfect upbringing and perfect training, that would not have allowed them to accomplish what you accomplished. It had to have been some sort of spiritual phenomenon of a person just believing and pushing forward despite whatever the obstacles.
I didn't really even, it was always pushing me. It's funny when I look back, it always pushed me. And it would say, right, when I say it, I just mean, you know what I mean. But it would say, rise to the occasion. And so I would always, there was a lot of prayer, much meditation in every single episode of my show. People don't know that, but
maybe if you, last comment is a half Jew.
You shouldn't say that. You should not say that.
Well, I did, because my mother largely was assimilated. I looked at you as a model because, you had a non-Jewish husband on TV, and I was part of an intermarried family.
Oh,
so, where was I supposed to
mean.
understand my family dynamic?
Yeah.
It was you.
Well, you either you have a Jewish soul. That's what matters. You have a Jewish soul. There's nobody that has a half Jewish soul.
Yeah.
You have a Jewish soul. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Roseanne, can I ask you, the first time you came to Israel and your connection with the land of Israel, and can you just tell our listeners out there how you felt when you first came to Israel and the importance of Israel to you?
Yeah, when I was a little girl, my uncles used to sing a song because they were very involved with Israel
that's
for a
land of
long,
me
long
there.
time when it was still called Palestine. And there was a song they sang, and I used to sing it too in my act there, my Shirley
All right,
Temple
so I
act.
can take the lovely Roseanne Barr off the show and return back to the regular show. Thanks everyone for tuning in. That's always kind of fun to have those what would you call them, nostalgic moments? And yes, the honking, she is. In fact, she is embracing her Jewish identity, which is why part of the reason why she recently spoke to Doovid on a live stream, which is what we're talking about right now. Over to you, Doovid.
Yeah, I was pretty happy, to, that's why, I was encouraging Jennifer to build up her channel, get monetized, increase the streaming, just power the internet, that there would be a panel and I would be on it, and Roseanne would be telling her story of Judaism, and I would question and comment on the trajectory of Roseanne. Even you see her that she probably did a lot of soul searching, and you could see that from a perspective like why did God choose her, so to say, to be a messenger to larger humanity, and within a power where she considered that she should do something for her people or try to spread a certain message, or whatever. So it was pretty interesting. I'm not that much into comedy, so I don't think I laughed at the show when I was young either. Like, I think I just watched a lot of TV.
It was just like a comfortable feeling show because it was familiar.
Well, it was probably like these Masonic plays to teach people how to get along. So you're just like, yeah, I mean, with the general message that the troubles that I'm going through are not that abnormal, and families, still love each other and get along, and people, grow up and go on to largely, if they work hard, achieve the American dream. So I was saying, like, yeah, that's generally the message being projected on American TV. So when you're sitting at home and saying, like, saying, like, okay, now I became more orthodox. I don't watch TV, period. I don't even have a cable network. I just have internet. I haven't watched a sitcom TV in like decades. Maybe in the backgrounds, but just sit and watch. Like, I did that when I was a kid, and I didn't know how to actualize my time as well. So I was as young. I did a little bit of homework. I relatively got pretty good grades. But there was a lot of hours to just watch TV, and a lot of, even my homework and things I did in front of the TV. And at that point, there was limited options, cable or whatever. So Roseanne was one of the better things on TV. I watched that. Now I wouldn't be surprised if your average person never heard of her. I guess The Conners is still one of the bigger shows on network TV, and anyone who watches The Conners, probably has to be familiar that at least sources from Roseanne. And then just, okay, she was an artist, a performer. She made her mark. Doovid was a consumer. Like, I'm selling CDs and books. I would like to be an author of CDs and books. I'm not, like, I wish Jennifer was an author of CDs and books. We're not that level yet. Hopefully, one day. But like, yeah, I have Roseanne. I've sold Roseanne, DVDs. That's one of the things I sell is Roseanne seasons of Roseanne. So she produced content. I consumed it. It was interesting, and that's what we're in streaming for. And is I wasn't the one doing the interview. There was another man, an older gentleman, a seasoned streamer, someone who knows a lot about Judaism, and whatever. So that was fine. I was glad to be on the panel with him. I'm not sure if you want to talk about just streaming in general and saying, okay, that possibly a good tide of events. Like, we don't have like a whole ton of viewers, because of it. I didn't like give a pitch like, tune into Week in Review, by the way, and it probably wasn't a good venue to do that. But it could be a sign of bigger and better things to come. I think the Science of Consciousness conference went by last week with basically nothing. Yeah, I saw like 3 videos posted on YouTube that looks like the people who presented recorded it and posted on YouTube, and none of them were that interesting. I mean, maybe in like a month or two they'll release the videos and they'll been interesting, but it didn't look like it generated any fanfare or media buzz or even social media buzz.
I think what's happening is that with the internet, the sort of tide of celebrity ebbs and flows faster because there's more celebrities. So like the memory people have is shrinking. I definitely remember, but maybe younger people don't.
Well, yeah, so younger.
If you were born in the year 2000, you probably never heard of Roseanne. But I saw she had a later show, but like I'm a bad person to ask because I haven't had cable for a really long time. So,
Well, no, I mean the spinoff of her show is still one of the most popular shows in America. So I would assume even younger people know who she is, because the Connors, they axed her out of her own show. I mean, it was going to be a reboot of Roseanne, and then I think they even paid her probably a few $1 million, and she dies, and the show goes on as the Connors, and the Connors is still one of the most popular shows in America. So I would assume that she's still a well-known media figure. Saying she ran for president in 2012. I mean, she didn't make the debate stage, but definitely tens, maybe even hundreds of millions of people, would have at least seen Roseanne Barr, ran for president. I mean, saying that she was maybe got more votes than like Bloomberg. I think she actually ran. I think she actually. I mean, you could look that up. But no, I would say like she's definitely an extremely famous woman, even till today. But at some point there will be that age factor. But it's like no, the Connors, remnant to the show that was completely based on her is still the most popular show and one of the most popular shows in America.
okay, I'll try to pull it up here. The first time I've heard of it, but I mean, I was like,
Well, you're not a
actively
U.S.
trying to
citizen
stay
or
out.
something, but
Yeah,
if you're
it's
like
sort of
Trump or
like
Luke Ford,
actively
these
trying to
things,
stay out of it. I didn't want to, get all stuck in it or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
these things are factually verifiable when it's network or whatever, that you could see millions of views or dollar amounts or the various things.
Talking about a 4chan conspiracy theory. Oh boy.
Oh, she ran like on the Green Party ticket or something on a third party, and she actually ran, or she I don't even remember.
This is news to me, so this page
You're probably like Wikipedia would have, like, if she ran and then have the vote totals.
All right, I'll just do that then because this website is getting unruly. Finding more and more of these websites are just completely unnavigable. I feel like the internet's kind of gone in phases. Like it was really good and then worse and then better and then worse and better. And now it's just like every single website has a pop-up asking you for your email. It's like
There's even a quick link there. I mean,
real
peace and
turnoff.
freedom, political party, peace and freedom.
All right, so controversies. National anthem, Hitler photo shoot, Zimmerman tweet. All right. Presidential campaign in 2012. There we go. She ran on the Green Tea Party ticket. And she also stated she'd run for prime minister in Israel. She invoked Tikkun Olam in her support of bringing women into politics and religion. There you go. Did not know that.
Yeah, but I mean, I was asked you how many votes she got.
Oh, well, let's have a look here.
When I get more into math, I want a number. I'm telling you, she's one of the most famous people in the world. I want a number.
I'm not sure if it's here. 469,627 votes. So there you go. Was that more than who's the guy? Bloomberg? You want to check how many he got?
Well, he didn't make it to the final election. So I mean, she still got close to 500,000 votes.
Yeah, I mean it wasn't enough, but not bad. Not bad. Good job, Roseanne. Yeah, geez, she's an icon. How long was her show on for anyway?
I think it was like 8 years. It may have been the #1 show in America for quite a few of those years.
Doooovid says Bloomberg is a schmaltzy. What's that?
I mean, schmaltz usually means like chicken fat or something. So I don't know what do you. Schmaltz
What do you mean
is,
chicken fat, Doooovid? What are you talking
I
about?
mean, schmaltz is usually like a food style, like I mean, I think it refers to like chicken fat or something like that. I don't know. He's mixing up his Yiddish.
So 8 years, and this would have been like in the 90s. And then you're saying there was a reboot show that was canceled because of something Roseanne said that was controversial. And this was more recently.
This was like 3 years ago, and currently the show is one of the most popular shows in America.
And it's about the family, and she's dead now.
On the TV show, yeah.
Okay.
So the TV show, they continued it that she died of opiate overdose. And so the weekly TV show that gets an average of 5 million viewers is called The Connors. I mean, because she was Roseanne Barr's her name, but her husband was Connor, so it was Roseanne Connor. So now the show is called The Connors, and at 5 million views an episode, is still one of the most popular shows in America. There's not really like any Seinfeld. Back in the day, they maybe get even like 10, 20 million, 20 million views. But I don't think there's that many really big sitcoms these days, just because of the mass competition and kind of the death of the networks in general.
Well, didn't reality TV kind of take over as the staple entertainment? Like, I'm just thinking back to when I was maybe in university, and my cousins, my aunt and uncle, were just like obsessed with Survivor. Like, they loved it. Every single time there's a new season, they were all excited about it, and it just seemed to play a role of prominence in their lives that sitcoms never could. So I think it's
I think the genres, they still make all types of shows, and there might have been a period of time where there was network TV with your general CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox, and CBS, and they might have produced their own content shows that tens of millions of people watched, and it was the most popular stuff in the country. And that moved from your old honeymooners, Leave It to Beaver, to game shows, to eventually reality TV. But in general, the genre as a whole is on a decline. So it's not like now it's moved from reality TV onto something else. It's just that the sitcom genre in general is on the decline, because there's all various type of content that is just individual producer as opposed to network produced, and then even professional quality. At this point, if you're big, you basically just produce your own content, no matter what you do. If you're a chess player, if you're like a gamer, and you're saying, well, the chess players might play in tournaments, but all the chess players have their own social media and YouTube and videos and books and merchandise. And basically everybody now produces their own content, whether you're a skier or an athlete. It's going to probably be economically best. I mean, you might occasionally do a contract with a bigger, but to basically just produce your own content and directly sell to buyers. So from that, the old studio model of producing big films or sitcoms, it doesn't have the same audience that that Seinfeld. Maybe it was good for the time, but in these days, like, was Seinfeld really that good? Could like any, and
Yeah,
then
I would say it was that good, but that's me. Like I don't really like to watch cheesy stuff, and Seinfeld was really tight. Like it had nice delivery, it had good musical, like there was a certain whimsical, nearly magical overtone of the music in that show, and the characters were actually engrossing
well,
in
you
a manner
date yourself.
reminiscent of an Irvine Welsh novel. So I've definitely like rewatched it and appreciated it watching it over. So I think it is one of those really good ones. I don't think you can really compare that to like the sort of cheaper thrills of watching a reality type TV show.
Well, I mean, maybe it was better produced and well thought out and various things that it was a top show for years, but it's representative of a karma that doesn't exist anymore, and that you might find like
No, the innocence has been lost, right? Because there was like all this like wave of stuff about New York, like American Psycho, Sex and the City, Seinfeld. There was like it comes and goes. You can't have it be that like it's cyclic. What fashion is cyclic, including cities, right? So New
a
York.
younger person now it basically provide no benefit to.
Well, it's unrelatable. Like I've seen react videos of kids to Seinfeld, and they're like, "Oh my god, that's like offensive," or whatever it is that they say. So yeah, it's dated in that sense. But if you could appreciate it for what it is, uh, it did make a lot of waves culturally. Like we're all still sort of living in the wake of a Seinfeld-esque cultural revolution because there was something really like authentic about. It was like a mix of authenticity and whimsy. I can't think of a show that's really matched it that was of that genre.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't buy it. I mean, saying like I mean, you should be talking numbers and saying we know the effect is quantifiable in terms of the people that were
It's
influenced, and
hard to
so okay,
quantify because the fact that Seinfeld exists is sort of crowding out part of the market, right? It's the same
no, I'm
with
saying it's the
saturation of
archetype,
any
and it
market.
had a I'm saying so you're part of the market that was saturated. It's saying that you're part of the archetype that it represents, but like I mean, how many people or whether it was that world changing, and then to even put yourself into okay, you're an archetype that has become phased out, doesn't exist anymore. So it's saying that it was a training model in general. So it's saying you were a God forbid you fell. I mean, you didn't fall from it because you took low birth. God forbid, you needed to watch plays to
It was
teach you how.
not within my free will to not take the bait. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying because you needed um, to be taught how to act and interact successfully at your level in society, and relatively because you took low birth.
And
You,
Seinfeld was part of my teaching opportunity.
I'm saying Seinfeld was relatively a great teacher, and to say that
Not really. I don't even know if I was allowed to watch Seinfeld.
well, I say even your parents, you say, okay, your parents were restricting, so they didn't even want you watching that. They didn't want you getting your lessons from Seinfeld, but you're saying, okay, where are you going to get your lessons from? And it's like, okay, like Seinfeld probably
My
knew better.
parents?
Seinfeld probably knew better than your parents relatively as a produced show and the whole team of people making it. So you're saying that no, I mean Seinfeld probably in the end of the day could have got you further than your parents, but there's risk associated with it.
What
And this point,
exactly lessons could I have learned from Seinfeld?
well, how to interact and be successful in urban society is basically Seinfeld is saying whatever your karma was that you were sitting there watching Seinfeld was basically your karma was sitting there and believing in the American dream. They're saying, yes, I could get along and interact with these people, and one day, I'll have my own apartment and I'll have my own friends at my place. Where you were sitting in your parents' place or someone else's place, and so it was basically, well, I mean, this is well known and documented. So it's saying if your period of time where you just need to phase out and fantasize about how one day you're gonna fulfill the Canadian dream or the American dream. So you watch Seinfeld and say like, oh, like, I could do it. I'm going to go out tomorrow and go to work and have a great day, and I'm going to be successful. And one day I'm going to have my own apartment, and I'm going to have my own parties with my own friends over, and I'm going to have my own possessions. I'm going to see things that I want and just buy them.
Yeah,
so
then you get to movies like Devil Wears Prada and The Big Short and other such sort of bubble popping gritty realism, and then the luster sort of fades, and then next thing you know, you got a mass exodus from New York City, which is kind of a dagger in the heart to those of us that
you
grew
don't
up
make sitcoms
loving
based
New
on
York
those.
City.
You don't make sitcoms based on those, and you have to have the general, and especially family sitcoms that you're generally the majority of people watching are younger people that watch hours and hours of TV, or these days like boomers, retired people that also watch hours and hours of TV. So these things are well known. Like someone like Trump or even Luke Ford specializes and is largely statistical. So he's saying you either know the statistics, so to say the facts, or you don't. And if if it's your field, I mean, it kind of goes like YouTube and streaming and building up an audience. There's a science to it. There's theories, and there's a language to it. And people who've studied it, speak that language, understand it, and you produce results. Like I mentioned, I got my two. I got back in the two top hundreds and on 200 top 100 in the world of those two chess variants. I was making those videos about thought and choice in chess and consciousness and decision making, and they're saying, okay, like I get to demonstrate it. Like I'm saying, I'm trying to demonstrate my superior understanding of the performance of mental tasks. So something competitive like chess, to say or even a variant of chess. So it's something that's demonstratable of you could listen to Doooovid give you advice about how to make mental calculations, and let me demonstrate it by playing some chess. So
They want to know whether all the characters on Seinfeld were Jewish or not.
I think they were. I mean, there might have been a few of the main characters. Yeah, I mean Seinfeld, Alexander,
Jerry,
Newman. All
what's
five.
the deal with pencils? Da, 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 da. So I think Jerry was referenced himself as being Jewish many times. So that was uncontested.
I mean, he's Hindu. We've discussed this. I'm saying, like, I mean, he's not a practicing Jew. He's a Hindu. He's
I know, but on the show, he identified as Jewish. Yes, multiple times. Went to a bris.
Is his own parents that act as his parents in the show?
No. I'm just saying the character Jerry Seinfeld on the show, he was Jewish because it was referenced numerous times in the show.
Yeah,
like,
and he has his mother and father.
Judaism for the jokes.
His mother and father are recurring characters in the show, and it's saying it's actually his real mother and father.
No, I don't think so. It's not. It's definitely not his real parents on the show. But yeah, so there was that. And then George, someone in the chat says he's Italian. As far as I know, George is never referred to as Jewish on the show.
No, I mean, Jason Alexander.
Elaine,
in fact, Jason Alexander, I mean, we were just mentioning Roseanne and and her. I mean, Jason Alexander, I mean, one thing, Elaine Dreyfus moderated the Democratic National Convention. So it's like the effect of Seinfeld, that Dreyfus, who's a Jew, and she's actually descended from the famous French military Dreyfus from the Dreyfus Affair, but she was the MC of the Democratic National Convention, and then Jason Alexander like moderated some big event for like Kamala Harris and like the ADL and a bunch of Silicon Valley donors or something like that. But it was like Jason Alexander and like the CEOs of like Google, Facebook, I don't know who the name is exactly, but it was like Jason Alexander that moderated it. So it's saying like the conspiracy is real, and it's saying like yes, they are Jews, and like yes, they are still some of the most influential people in the world.
Judge, we need a Festivus for the rest of us.
But like no, I mean I think Biden's still going to lose. I mean, you think like Seinfeld was actually like very good friends with Obama, and they got together a few times, and but no, I think Biden's still going to lose despite Elaine stomping for him.
Oof. Well, I mean, there's just no way to come back from some of the public blunders. It's like I got one video of it, and he's like literally walking off the stage mid-sentence, and he's got to be like redirected back on stage, and it's like that doesn't inspire confidence. Of all the things that disinspire confidence, that's at the top or bottom of the list, depending on how you want to look at it. But yeah, it's
if you understand, Freemasonry is extremely powerful, and especially to explain things like entertainment. But these principles like ignorance is the natural condition. Everybody is born into ignorance. So if you take low birth, there may not be a great attempt to help you relieve you of your condition of ignorance. So you take higher birth, you say, okay, still ignorance is going to be the natural condition upon birth. However, all of the forces to dispel that ignorance and enlighten the person may be there. And so you understand television, plays, entertainment, music, all these things are designed to teach people how to interact and get along in society. And it's relative to your karma. So it's okay, like, your karma of the birth you took was that like you enrolled in Seinfeld 101 and and took like
Yep.
And took it for 8 years, and because
Yep.
because ignorance was your natural condition, and you needed like a guru to teach you how to interact. But at the end of the day, okay, Seinfeld was part of transcendental meditation, and at some point you need a teacher because ignorance is the natural condition. And then once you became enlightened, your enlightenment might include like information about your teacher. It's like, oh man, like this was my teacher, and like this person who suffers all of the faults of the flesh and all of the sins of the flesh was the person that helped me on my path to enlightenment. And say, well, yeah, that was my karma. That whatever reason, like you move out of your parents' house, you grow up, you start dealing with a bunch of people, you need a strategy. And we talk about this in relation to consciousness, because Doooovid's theory, the multiple truth hypothesis, and all this study on chess that I hope to continue, is going to talk about this strategy development in the larger context of free will and consciousness, and kind of like chunking from lower level patterns to higher level patterns. Me and Jennifer want to talk about Stephen Wolfram's talk with Lex Friedman. I guess Lex Friedman was with Joe Rogan, but in terms of these development of a strategy, people need so if you believe in Masonry in general, that there as a religion, or just as a structure to explain how these work, but society approves teachers, and these teachers teach people acceptable strategies to get ahead in current society. And that's what television sitcoms and politicians, all these people they're generally teachers who are here to teach us acceptable strategies to get ahead in society.
Well, I wonder where the Seinfeld glass ceiling is. Back to Wolfram. Did you want me to screen share the bits that I had? They're not very long. They're just like little bits that I thought were interesting. Let me just grab my paper here.
Okay, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so there was a bit about everything being computations, and he comes back to mentioning the importance of simple fundamentals. And then Lex asked a question about a three-dimensional universe. And then afterwards, I wanted to talk about what discrete and continuous really mean. Okay, Doovid has walked away. Wow, you could tell I'm really making an impression, eh? Doesn't even take 2 seconds for Doovid to walk away. So I will, just for the benefit of the audience, yeah, what I wanted to talk about was mostly relating to getting a clear definition on continuous versus
Obvious.
discrete, because
That's to me surprising.
it's actually not that
that there is
what that even means, because when you're talking about discrete, you're talking about what exactly? Got to think it through. What does it mean for something to be discrete? Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is stair-stepping function. You can look this up, stair-stepping function. And basically talking about anything that goes from natural numbers progression. That's what first thing I think of when I think of discrete. But basically it means that the basic ingredients are separate, indivisible entities. So you don't have any elements between hydrogen and helium, therefore they're discrete elements. Okay? So the problem is that discrete is an abstract qualifier, whereas reality is sort of a mucky, messy glob of confusing crap sometimes. So if we want to get to a point where we can really understand what it is that these theories are even saying, discrete meaning one thing and continuous meaning other, and don't be shy to like interrogate the meanings that people are using, because it's a bit like the term God, like not everyone means the same thing when they use it. So you have to sometimes go through that process of inquiry, actually get the answers, because you may end up having a discussion where for whatever reason you have different axioms, right? And at what point do you even realize that they're different? And then you have to basically scrap it. All right, so I've got a bit here around the 40-minute mark, which I'm going to start right now. So enjoy. I'll be
because we mentioned
listening on
the concept so much, and a lot of people know it, but can you say what computational reducibility is?
Yeah, right. So I mean, the question is, if you think about things that happen as being computations, you think about the some process in physics, something that you compute in mathematics, whatever else. It's a computation in the sense it has definite rules. You follow those rules, you follow them many steps, and you get some result. So then the issue is, if you look at all these different kinds of computations that can happen, whether they're computations that are happening in the natural world, whether they're happening in our brains, whether they're happening in our mathematics, whatever else, the big question is, how do these computations compare? Are there dumb computations and smart computations, or are they somehow all equivalent? And the thing that I kind of was sort of surprised to realize from a bunch of experiments that I did in the early 90s, and now we have tons more evidence for it, this thing I call the principle of computational equivalence, which basically says when one of these computations, one of these processes that follows rules, doesn't seem like it's doing something obviously simple, then it has reached the sort of equivalent level of computational sophistication of everything. So what does that mean? That means that, you might say, gosh, I'm studying this little tiny program on my computer. I'm studying this little thing in nature, but I have my brain, and my brain is surely much smarter than that thing. I'm going to be able to systematically outrun the computation that it does because I have a more sophisticated computation that I can do. But what the principle of computational equivalence says, you quickly realize is, if you're going to pack everything about our universe into this tiny rule, not much that we are familiar with in our universe will be obvious in that rule. So you don't get to fit all these parameters of the universe, all these features of, this is how space works, this is how time works, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You don't get to fit that all in. It all has to be sort of packed in to this thing, something much smaller, much more basic, much lower level machine code, so to speak, than that. And all the stuff that we're familiar with has to kind of emerge from the operation of.
So the rule in itself, because of the computational reducibility, is not going to tell you the story. It's not going to give you the answer to. It's not going to let you predict what you're going to have for lunch tomorrow.
Right.
And it's not going to let you predict basically anything about your life, about the universe.
Right. And you're not going to be able to see in that rule, oh, there's the 3 for the number of dimensions of space and so on.
Right.
That's not going to be
So
there.
space-time is not going to be obviously.
Right. So the question is then, what is the
today.
universe made of? It's a basic question. And we've had some assumptions about what the universe is made of for the last few thousand years that I think in some cases just turn out not to be right. And, the most 1940s, 1950s, and so on to explore this.
Like the way he thought, you mean that there is something very, very small and discrete that's underlying space.
Yes. And that means that, so, the mathematical theories in physics assume that space can be described just as a continuous thing. You can just pick coordinates, and the coordinates can have any values, and that's how you define space. Space is this just sort of background sort of theater on which the universe operates.
But can we draw a distinction between space as a thing that could be described by 3 values, coordinates, and how are you using the word space more generally when you say?
No, I'm just talking about space
like
as in what we experience in the universe.
So that you think this 3D aspect of it is fundamental?
No, I don't think that 3D is fundamental at all. Actually, I think that the thing that has been assumed is that space is this continuous thing where you can just describe it by, let's say, 3 numbers, for instance. But the most important thing about that is that you can describe it by precise numbers, because you can pick any point in space, and you can talk about motions, any infinitesimal motion in space.
And that's what continues.
But you were just starting to talk a little bit about what, we talked about, space that represents all the stuff that's in the universe. The question is, what does that stuff do? And for that, we have to start talking about time and what is time and so on. And, one of the basic idea of this model is time is the progression of computation. So in other words, we have a structure of space, and there is a rule that says how that structure of space will change. And it's the application, the repeated application of that rule that defines the progress of time.
And what does the rule look like in the space of hypergraphs?
Right. So what the rule says is something like, if you have a little tiny piece of hypergraph that looks like this, then it will be transformed into a piece of hypergraph that looks like this. So that's all it says. It says you pick up these elements of space, and you can think of these edges, these hyper edges, as being relations between elements in space. You might pick up these 2 relations between elements in space. And we're not saying where those elements are or what they are, but every time there's a certain arrangement of elements in space, then arrangement in the sense of the way they're connected, then we transform.
Okay, that's about all I wanted to watch. So I hope people in the audience enjoyed that. We've got a couple questions, so I can address those. Doesn't look like Doooovid's back yet, but we'll see. We'll see what was said. So, there was an actual good question in here that I wanted to. Oh yeah, Deborius wants to know what computational equivalence was. Okay, so it's basically saying that the cardinality of your operator is the same. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, when you're talking about 1 dimension, you have a line. 2 dimensions, you have a plane. 3 dimensions, you have what they call, I guess it's like hyperplane. I don't know, it's not really defined. It's like the whole 3D thing. So computational equivalence is basically, is there as much information in one place as another? So you couldn't say that R1 is computationally equivalent to R2 because it's not. But you could say that R2 is approximately equivalent to R1 cross 1, right? So if we want to go to 2D, we can take two one-dimensional surfaces, superimpose them orthogonally or at a right angle, and we'll get a 2D surface. Now, how does it work in our universe? Well, kind of like that, but the fundamental rule is that space dimensions always occur in threes. There's just no way to separate meaningfully a space dimension, but they do occur in threes, and so they can be broken down in an approximate set of three coordinates, which is again approximately orthogonal coordinates, but there is no true orthogonality. So yeah, I see people are laughing in the chat there. Yeah, I'm not sure. Hopefully he'll come back soon because, as we all know, I'm not the greatest at monologue. So if there's any questions, that would be appreciated so we could keep the show going. And yeah, there was something else in here that I thought was quasi interesting. And it was something Donald Robertson said, but now it's all been shifted away. And he says that the universe can be understood through computation rather than mathematically. Yeah, but I mean, what's the difference, right? Like, a computation is a thing, right? So we got to actually drill down and answer what's a computation. So in my system, when I'm saying what's a computation is something that happens in addition to a waveform reduction. So if there's a waveform reduction, that means that energy is basically being crunched in the waveform the way it is through a slit. A computation happens when information actually gets transcribed between the collapsing waveform. Because if a collapsing waveform, you think of it like drawing in an accordion, right? Like you're pushing energy, you're saturating energy into one point, which is driving it all to one place. Boom. And then you get a computation. So waveform reduction and observation are the same. Computation is a special type of waveform reduction. And your criterion is that some type of information has been imparted. It's not just like for example, the electron going through the slit isn't doing any computation, quote unquote, to the slit because the slit is unchanged at the end. But sometimes there's actual literal computation going on, i.e. between what you perceive from the environment and what your brain perceives. All right, so Doovid's back. I played the parts that I was interested in. You watched this whole show, eh? So you already know what they were talking about. Hello?
Yeah, I've watched at this point now tens of hours of Wolfram. But yeah, I watched all 4 hours or 2 hours. I watched it in 2-speed. A pretty good conversation. I felt I got a better understanding. I think that Lex, had enough of a background, quick enough calculation, high enough IQ, whatever, to largely understand the framework and how it might apply to some of the larger ideas in science, and a little back and forth related to the larger philosophy and science. So it was pretty good for people that are interested in that. But it is 4 hours, so so how concerned are you? And there's a lot of good information about a lot of important scientific topics and the nature of mathematics and physics in general, and it's probably the direction Week in Review will likely go into, and in a certain point, like modern day debate, I guess they didn't get back to you, did they?
No, I was really disappointed about that. I just got that one, what seemed like sort of an automatic response letter. And yeah, so we'll see. It seems like they pretty much have their like roster of people that they want to have on. Like they had a flat earth debate. It was just sort of cringy.
Yeah, and they're almost like repeating things, and I see their numbers kind of drop off, and maybe they get like Destiny or JF or something to get a little bump in viewership, or then they start getting back down to the small thousands with just their regular roster. But I mean, it's not a big deal. But I was saying, like, to a certain level, that those are good debates and interesting debates, but now that they're just rehashing the same ones every few weeks, it's like, yes, you're going to have to do your homework. Yes, you're going to have to work really hard to understand some really complex things. And like, yes, it is going to involve math and calculus and science and computer programming. I'm sorry. Like, that's what it takes. And if you're like Stephen Wolfram, I was good enough at chess to know the people that were good enough to get like invited to like elite training things like for kid geniuses and also for math. Like I knew some of the people that were chosen, but I was never chosen for any of those at any level. Even like in high school, I even applied for a few and was just not accepted. But like I think Wolfram, like he even like recruits like young teenage genius math people and has like summer camps and training things to try to get people who exhibit exceptional ability for these things at a young age involved in his activities. And that's actually pretty common, among high achievement people in fields like even chess has things like that, and alt music and different fields of Judaism. That's not uncommon, but Wolfram is pushing it. He's doing good. He's got his own business, and the computational nature, it's a function of the multiple truth hypothesis. So I'm saying, like, I appreciate what Wolfram's doing, and to me it fits perfectly into what I'm conceptualizing, the multiple truth hypothesis, especially past the measurement limit. We're saying the limit of our
past the measurement limit.
The limit of our ability to understand.
So that would be reaching the measurement limit. So if you
we'll still have some level.
If you understood as much as could be understood about a subject, then you would have reached the human measurement limit of knowledge on that subject. Because there's like a biological limit.
Yeah. So past whatever that level of understanding, there'll be a certain level of computational ability beyond understanding where you can still produce the correct result, even though we can't necessarily understand how we produce the correct result. And, anybody who takes tests or, went through school and had tests and had problems that were difficult, and, sometimes you just guessed. And, there's a certain skill to being a good guesser too. And, sometimes you could understand a certain amount to, to get partial credit or guess in a certain way to demonstrate a higher level of understanding of the question, than just a random guess. But related to a lot of the chess studies I'm doing, the layered levels of understanding when someone sees something and how deeply something is capable to be understood versus the understanding of how the human mind understands things and breaking it into levels, like how you educate people and create a curriculum for people to, over a period of time, build understanding of a subject and levels of expertise to create like classifying systems, or like engineering, where you have certifications in these various things. So new fields of science of consciousness. Looks like the not much being pushed forward this year with the conference. Wolfram doesn't see, he's not affiliated with that. I'm saying there's interesting things happening in the sciences, and saying that Wolfram's one of the people doing interesting things because he's producing results, and whether the greater implications or not, could be that Wolfram's work doesn't really have that many greater implications. However, he's produced a useful tool because it's makes quick and relatively accurate computations.
And also, like, scientific revolutions don't happen in a vacuum, right? Like, as we get closer to the correct answer. There'll be answers that are partial, not fully complete, but they give a partial answer. Like I would say JF's theory, it fits this description. So it's ultimately going to be not matching the correct theory, but it's like a stepping stone that was needed because people need to think in a certain way for there to be that new theory, the actual traction required for the new theory.
Yeah, and there could be some evidence pointing that what we're going to get is when we apply like machine learning to computation, is that the, so to say, equations aren't actually true. And when we get to the computational truth of the matter, the equations have value, but they're not an accurate representation of what's going on. And the computation will demonstrate that there's actually something different going on.
Well, they're
So it's
their
like-
structure, right? Like he's arguing for a computational structure. He's saying here's a finite set of elements, and then recursively permute these elements through adjacent states. And then his argument is because the objects resulting from that. So ultimately, the only axiom is a tacit causality because you're always going forward into the causal chain as you're iterating your basic set, right?
You
Because
want to do a
it's
screen share,
finite set. Okay, what would you like me to screen share?
just like a YouTube search of Wolfram, and just like on a weekly basis, because I think like every week now there's a whole bunch of these like public study sessions or training sessions where people are learning how to program Wolfram or translating their ideas into Wolfram, and so maybe if you just pop up and I've been watching Wolfram himself on interviews, and he does Q&As on his own channels, but I haven't actually like been on one of his own channels Q&A. But if you just search Wolfram on a regular week, there's he's got a lot of stuff happening. I was thinking on YouTube to search on
Got
YouTube.
his news up. He's apparently suing the federal government after an H-1B visa was denied, but I'm sure that's not what we want to be looking into right now. Okay.
I was just saying to search it on YouTube.
Oh, YouTube, sorry. Okay. So he has his own channel then?
Well, he has his own channel, but there's a lot more going on than just his own channel. So just do like a 1 week search for Wolfram on YouTube.
Okay, I just need a couple minutes, but I'll get it up in a second here. Yeah, I mean, it might be fun to like reach out to him to try to get one of his grunts to implement my unified field model. Because all I'd have to do is link it up with causality. And his model isn't really how I see my model getting implemented, but maybe it could work if you could turn the time dimension backwards, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably got his like networking into like science fairs, math competitions across the globe, recruiting people at very young ages, and trying to get them working like on his language and his things, and he might even, if he has the money, be very generous in these things and just trying to encourage at a young age people that have apparent talent in these fields to start using his software or work with his ideas. And so that's probably a good thing, and it's probably good for math and science, like the type of fruit they'll have. And but yeah, I do think that he's one of the more interesting people in the field right now than you see. He might be on Joe Rogan soon. Lex Friedman started telling Joe Rogan about Wolfram in the middle of the show, saying like the theory of everything. So Lex Friedman mentioned Eric Weinstein, Joe Rogan obviously knows. And then he said Stephen Wolfram. I don't think Joe Rogan had heard of Stephen Wolfram. It's because Joe Rogan's not educated enough. He probably didn't take calculus. You said, like, if you took, like, Rogan, if you'd taken freshman calculus in university, probably would have cheated, and he probably would have, like, used Wolfram's page to, like, do his, help him with his homework or something like that. But, like, he probably didn't even take calculus. And, so at a certain level, you're saying, like, no, I mean, Joe Rogan isn't going to understand the theory of everything. The mathematics is just going to be beyond him. He might understand some of the larger concepts, but, I mean, if you just scroll down on a regular week and just see what are all these, like, Q&A or like sessions that people are having, are there like tens and tens of videos just in the last week? And your thing keeps on flickering in and out. But
just loading the. I was waiting for a background video, but yeah, just in the last week, quite a bit here. He's on Lex Friedman's channel, and I guess that was released in parts. So yeah.
Yeah, so that probably got more views than anything else, but I meant all the other stuff. So I mean, all the top ones are from the Lex, because most of his stuff only gets like hundreds or even tens of views. So here's live CEOing episode 386-87. Your net function design review in the Wolfram language, calculus and algebra features design. And so that's episode 387, and there's getting 300 to 500 views. I think if you keep on going down, he's got other people that are like working together on his software.
Oh, I thought you wanted me to load that one up, so I was gonna play it, but it's having a bit of a hard time loading, so I'll just go back when I can. It's just asking a bit much from the computer to do all this stuff, so yeah, so I guess that's basically what the stream looks like. Code, learn to code. So yeah, I mean, 382 views is actually impressive given the fact that it's such a niche thing, So getting this much attention through Lex Friedman is, yeah, good for him. But does look quite a bit here.
Well, I mean, I think you just keep on going. So, I mean, these are just in the, the small hundreds, and a lot of these still are all related to Lex Friedman. Yeah. But I think, I mean, you might even be able to just make it over 20 minutes. Then you got there the Wolfram Physics Project working session. So this is on his own channel, and sometimes other people on other channels just working with his software.
Looks like he streamed another one 2 days ago of himself. Yeah, I just selected it down to the 20 minutes and longer ones. Science and technology Q&A for kids. And that has a few more views, but not even 1,000 views. So yeah, it's tough. People kind of cringe at math, don't they? It's intimidating. So they don't tend to study it unless they have to. I'm wondering how many of these views is because people had to do it in school.
No, I don't think anyone in school would be like assigning Stephen Wolfram. I think
like university students who have a book from Wolfram. I mean, there's tons of books.
I'm telling you, like Wolfram recruits, like probably already at like elementary school. At most people with propensity to be very good at math will already demonstrate it at a young age, elementary school, junior high school, and saying like his network is probably already recruiting at these math competitions at a young age and things like summer camp. So he's probably got his own private network of math geeks that he's built up in different ways. I don't think he's within the university system. I mean, he has his own company, obviously, also the Mathematica, the product Mathematica that's sold and a lot of universities use. And, I remember Mathematica used to come to University of Michigan to hire, and but he himself is not within the university system. He's just a private mathematician, eccentric millionaire thinker that builds up his own network. And my understanding is that he does that through largely youth math competitions and festivals. Like, I guess that people with a propensity for math usually start participating in these things when they're young, and there's networks, and that's where he gets his math network from, not from within a university or a traditional structure.
Is he or is he not a publisher of physics textbooks? I thought he was, but perhaps I'm not sure. I don't see it online here. I see a couple of textbooks.
He wrote 2 books they're not college textbook, like no college course, no college professor teaches Wolfram's books, but he wrote them like textbooks. I have them still behind me. They're my father's copies, but he wrote A New Kind of Science, which is, it's not, no university teaches Wolfram's A New Kind of Science. It's like, it's like 1,200 pages, and it's a new, the combination way of looking at science. And this was written almost like 20 years ago. And this one was written a few years ago, the last, like, maybe even year, a project to find the fundamental theory of physics. So the book 20 years ago was just looking at the use of mathematics within science, that largely science is reduced to mathematics, and just questioning what that means, and the ability of what we could compute to the meaning of what that means for science, to his more recent one that just focuses on the implications to solving the mysteries of physics. But I think they're textbook style, but like, no university actually teaches that. He's not like an accepted academic. And I think he does have a PhD, but he's not like a academic like that. I don't think he's not a professor. He's a businessman, and his business is Mathematica, which is computational software that
Okay, that must have been what I was thinking of. I just assumed.
You're familiar with Mathematica, right?
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, that's why I'm familiar with Wolfram, is because of his computational software. I just pulled up this article on May 6, 2020. Physicists criticized Stephen Wolfram's theory of everything. The iconoclastic researcher and entrepreneur wants more attention for his big ideas, but so far researchers are less than receptive. So here we go. He blames himself for not changing the face of physics sooner. Okay, I guess he's got. This is in Scientific American.
Yeah, so Wolfram is looked at like as an entrepreneur, and he's not, kind of like accepted as a person who would be producing groundbreaking work on physics. Just like Eric Weinstein is generally, not taken that serious within the physics community, but he is a successful businessman known in the world, and his software is, saying that he's producing these theories is not, anomaly. The 2 people in the field of mathematics, they know who the man is. He did study under Richard Feynman, and he does have some of the best computational software on the market, including free computational software that almost all college students use, because they could solve calculus problems, and hence do your homework for you. But that he would be solving the theory of everything is like, yeah, he's like a Donald Trump type figure, that he's just trying to sell more of his programs or build up some sort of public image. But like, no one in the physics community thinks that like Wolfram is like produced anything near as great as he claims to be producing.
Sorry about that. Yeah, well, at least he's trying, right? So I didn't know. I guess I had heard about him tangentially in university, but because I never cheated, I never used his software before. And also, I wasn't.
It doesn't have. I mean,
outside of it.
I'm just hyperbole cheating. I mean, you could just say to check to make sure it's right, or just for the fun of it. But I'm saying you could, and sometimes it's not actually cheating. I mean, it might not be against your rules or code of ethics to just plug the question to Wolfram Alpha.
Yeah. I'm not saying that everyone.
I just use the word cheating, but
I'm not saying everyone who uses it is cheating. I just I was in a math major, so you had to do everything by hand anyway. So using that wouldn't have helped me in anything I was using. I stuck, I guess, to Microsoft Excel. Yay. Sort of.
Well, you could plug in differential equations. And Wolfram Alpha even had graphs, and find like points, and I mean, it was a pretty good computational tool. Like I use it occasionally. I forget what, I mean, when I used to take courses on edX, I would occasionally use Wolfram Alpha, just to solve, calculus like integrals or derivatives, because I didn't really want to do it by hand. I just plug it into Wolfram Alpha, and then occasionally I'll have sometimes an algebra equation, but just whatever reason I have an equation, and I'll use Wolfram Alpha just to.
I always solve them by hand, as a matter of principle. That's just, I guess that's my German side coming out, just doing all this hard work for nothing.
Or even just wasting paper for nothing.
Oh, God forbid. But yeah, I mean, I'm aware of it. I just never wanted to go and overcome the learning barrier to it. I'm sure it would have been helpful. I just always stuck to MATLAB. I think it was Aiken saying, yeah, in the chat, he said he's been using MATLAB for 30 years. That's what I used as well. But I can see the edge, solving numerical problems. You'd have an edge with something like that. I guess I never needed it for whatever reason when I was in school.
Well, I like that he's streaming and he's active. So, okay, like a lot of the popular physics authors are streaming and are rather successful of it. Like, like Green and the World Science Fair. And they have they produce a lecture every week or so. I was watching Sean Carroll. So Sean Carroll's got his podcast, and then he's got his biggest ideas and equations, and it's pretty good. And the guy Green from World Science Fair, who was doing that equation a day, back in a while, now has their Brian Greene. So I mean, these are popular authors of physics, and they have YouTube channels, and they stream regularly, and even have Q&As where you could get in the chat and ask them something without even doing a super chat. But I mean, they get tens of thousands of views, but it's conceivable that you could even directly get in a Q&A and ask them, even like Vincent Raccanello with his This Week in Virology, that if you emailed him, and he would probably answer your question on air. But Wolfram seems much more prolific. I mean, Lex Friedman is more like a Ben Shapiro type. I mean, he's like science talk, but it's like pure commercial, model and advertising products and things like that. As where, okay, Brian Greene and Sean Carroll, like they're authors of books and they have their own media, but they're not like Ben Shapiro and you, where like they're reading paid advertisements. Like they might be monetized. You might have to watch the advertisement, and they have their own media in general that they're like authors and CD, DVD series, or whatever reason that they maintain a channel. They also might have like a foundation, pro education foundation money that is paying them to do this because they consider it like a charity because it's public education to pay some of the considered top minds in physics to produce material like that. But Wolfram seems like he's more active in the streaming, and he's got his own network. I think a lot of his network is like IRL, like he actually has like his own like summer camp. I'm pretty sure. Like they're like I'm not joking about it. Like he literally has his own like summer camp for math geniuses, and so he's got his own IRL network, but he's using streaming to manage it, and relatively taking an open source network with it, that he's just putting it out there, and it would appear that like modern day debates where like, okay, I reached out to them, Jennifer reached out, they didn't get back to us. So I don't know, Wolfram, how accessible he is, but I was like, yeah, I'm impressed. So like of the big name people out there, like, okay, of course Brian Greene and Sean Carroll have their own pages and make good content. And honestly, like a lot of times I pop something on, and I do pop on Brian Greene or Sean Carroll, but I feel that Wolfram is more likely to be breaking ground than what other people I see doing like that.
Well, it might be a good time to segue into what I mentioned to you earlier about actually taking the next step forward to implementing some of my ideas perhaps within his framework, because I saw he was interested in that. I don't know if it's still available, but it's something to look into. So is it okay if I talk through this and explain basically how the model goes through an event like this?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm listening.
So if people are interested to see more of this, and I do suggest you have a look so that you can really get a feel for it. And I'll show you real quick what this looks like right now. And it's super fascinating. You're basically looking at a video of the sun. And I'm not sure, it says a decade of the sun, but basically what you want to do is, I guess, other than appreciate the amazing quality of this image, is sort of start to pattern recognize. So there's a few patterns we can see right off the hop, that there's some segments that are darker and other segments that are discharging what appear to shapes that appear, they sort of are a bit reminiscent of magnetic lines. Can you see what I'm talking about, Doovid?
Yeah.
So like the orbs, and I have this other diagram that's also loaded, and I could bring it up just to sort of go between them. This is like a zoom in on it. So we have these events that are happening throughout the sun, and we want to get an idea of what caused them. So basically, if we're going to solve this, we have to get an idea of what happened here. So the sun is going to be modeled some way, which is going to give us the values that we see here. And it's a little bit tricky to try to see an overall pattern in the sun, but one thing we can observe right off the hop is that there's nothing in the top 25% or bottom 25% that's all that active. The activity appears to be reserved to the center. Do you agree with that, Doovid? Do you see what I'm saying? Like there's not really any explosions happening in the top segment. Like it's in the top maybe 25.
Yeah, I see that. But I mean, so how are you explaining that phenomenon?
I'm just trying to make sure we're on the same page in terms of what patterns we're recognizing, because it's sort of like a big cluster F of confluence of factors, but we just want to make sure we're recognizing the right patterns. So I just want to make sure you agree that you don't really see any of these massive light luminous discharges in the top segment and the bottom segment, right?
Yeah,
So
they're clustered around the equator.
well, it's not focused at the equator, but it's all happening within a certain range that is like south of the top northernmost part and north of the southernmost part. So the question is, where does that come from? And then we do a comparison with the most proximal object that's most similar, which is planet Jupiter here. So the question is, are we observing something similar on Jupiter? So I've got Jupiter now loaded up. And we can see that there's something going on that's maybe similar, but maybe not exactly the same. Can you see the Jupiter diagram?
Yeah.
So we could sort of just assume that there's something that causes this ballooning of energy more towards the center and not at the poles. And I'm guessing that's going to be because of torque, because there's less torque near the poles because it's not spinning as much as around the equator. So I don't know if that's the right answer, but basically we're looking for a mechanical reason why these are the paths that the energy discharges take. And basically you have a system that's almost all in the exact same phase, but it has a force of gravity, and then it also has a force of the same thing that caused the sun, which is this uncertainty principle, which is what excludes energy. So whenever we see these energy ejections, we're pretty sure it's an uncertainty thing, and we know that for uncertainty to happen, it has to be some form of gravitational collapse. So the darker regions on the sun would be where it's starting to get pretty dense, and then where it tears apart, because if it's getting dense somewhere and it's a constant amount of mass, it's going to get less dense somewhere else. So then it's going to tear apart, and there's going to be a chance for some energy to come out. And when it comes out, it follows a path of a geodesic discharge, almost like an electric field, where you can see that it's almost reaching out from the hole and reaching around to the adjacent holes. And so you're getting like a pseudo equilibrium state that's set up all throughout here. And as I look at it for longer, I am noticing it's more like two lines like what we saw in Jupiter, which is probably some sort of energetic saturation effect. Like what you have on Jupiter, you have a thicker line just above the midline and just below, where it appears to be more energy going on. So that would be something that would tell us information about the overall density of the object, i.e. its willingness to precipitate these effects, which we can predict using the uncertainty principle, which tells us what gravity amount you need to have uncertainty effects, i.e. energetic discharge, happen. So we could basically model this field using his system, and we would see a system that would evolve over time that would be similar to this, because we would be feeding it the same basic firsthand information of what formed the sun by understanding how the sun works. We don't have any reason to expect that it's going to behave exactly the same as Jupiter, but it's probably going to be similar because they're in the same universe, but because they have a different profile in terms of what they contain, it's going to be a slightly different mechanics. So yeah, thanks for listening. And that's all I had to say about that.
Awesome. Bravo. Very nice. So, I mean, you thought that you wanted to develop formal equations to explain the phenomenon, and you thought that maybe that it'd be easier to develop the equations in Wolfram language.
I thought it would be fun.
Attempt both that.
I thought it would be fun because I think like if I can take something that a bunch of other people already know and put it together with my theory, then the knowledge from my theory will seep into them through this proxy that they already understand.
Yeah, I guess because we have traditional Western educations, if you're thinking like, something, okay, we were both preemptively trained in the calculus because it was a useful skill, and just, educated people that even in high school, by already like 16 years old, I was, learning calculus. And even my grandfather, as young as like 10, was like already telling me things about the calculus. And, it was known that, like educated people knew calculus, and that even if I didn't become a doctor or engineer, like, I was going to learn calculus. And, no, I mean, reality is, majority of people never learn calculus. And then, to let alone to say, in theory, let's say I hadn't just, been taught calculus because, that's what educated people know, and I'm educated, so I know calculus. But, in theory, let's say that I had something that I wanted to solve, something I wanted to understand, or some phenomenon I wanted to be able to explain. And, so it was like, well, what tools are there to be able to understand it? And he was like, well, calculus. Have you tried calculus? And so, these days, like, well, preemptively, we're trained in calculus, and it's basically understood that almost all engineering phenomenon work in calculus. That any field of engineering and science is basically going to work in the realm of calculus. So if you're saying Wolfram, I don't call this like an alternative to calculus, but to some extent you say it's alternative solution to solve problems. That, Jennifer says, okay, I've noticed the patterns of this phenomenon, and she thinks she has some sort of insight on the pattern that could be expressed in a scientifically useful way, like a theorem. I mean, you think she's Jennifer, gonna formally develop a theorem that there's gonna eventually be an equation. It's gonna be the Church of entropy variation of some equation of.
It'll be more of an approach, a strategic approach to problem solving. Like I had this other diagram that I'll just show real quick because I just remembered I hadn't had a chance to show it. But it's like, whoops. Talking about the sun here. Yeah, there. I just wanted to show it on the screen. It's a geodesic. So the most similar theorem that exists right now would be, so basically I'm not really inventing anything new because this theorem already exists, and it's called the least action principle. I'm just applying the least action principle within a new coordinate system, which is a quantum coordinate system. So there's no new information with regards to base field equations, right? Because I can point to you to the least action principle and say, well, this is technically what is predicted by this. But in order to predict what we see here, we need to be using the right coordinate system, right? We need to be using a spherical coordinate system because these harmonics don't make sense in any other system. So you've got your primary sphere, which is the full sun, and then you go down to one particular region where you can identify one of these patterns, because the patterns aren't, it's not just one pattern in the whole sun. It's sort of a motif of patterns, and we can broad strokes make judgments about where the energy is at a maximum, but it's down to a structural information thing. Like there's not a necessarily rhyme or reason to why there's a particular explosion in a particular location other than what they call the anthropic principle. So basically what this is saying is that there's going to be energy that is released, and it's going to be released geodesic. And the geodesic is not just going to occupy the surface geodesic, it's going to occupy every other. It's not just taking the line of closest approach to the other region, it's taking all lines of approach in an energetically weighted way. So there's a statistical distribution of directions that the energy can go in, and the amount of energy that goes per path all depends on the overall structural geometry, i.e. the overall path is predicted by that which distributes the energy most efficiently. So having huge buildups of energy in any one location is not favored. Why? Entropy, because entropy is always an unmaking of order. And energy and order kind of go together because the energy is what fuels things to higher states of order. So again, thanks for listening. So yeah, I guess it's not even really a new theory. It's just taking the least action principle. Because are you familiar with the least action principle? It's a path integral.
Yeah.
Right. So for those of you in the audience who aren't familiar with it, it's a very generic equation, right? So I'm not technically saying anything that wasn't already contained informationally in this old equation here, which has been around for a while. My computer's being a little slow, so I'll pull it up and bring it up in a minute. If you had any comments there, Doovid, thanks for listening.
Yeah, but if I had advanced further and maybe God willing, God willing, hopefully I will, maybe even this year, I trained on ComSoil multiphysics, and I never got the software. Actually, I had like a trial version for a few months, but I was never going to buy it. It was like tens of thousands of dollars. And, they sold it to the big corporations. And but I had been in a big school, and so they let me go to their training, and the university had copies. And some of the people I went to school with, eventually worked for ComSoil selling it. But it's a multi-physics platform that, in theory, creates the differential equation, does the computations for the physics of materials, where you could, create an object or a material, or even a series of flows, exchanges, moving objects, and then the attached physical properties. And when they sell these things, they usually sell them in batches. So like you get like thermodynamics, electricity, magnetism, materials. I forget the batches, but maybe one day we could look at something like ComSoil, or there's competitive. A lot of times these days, actually, you usually ship the equations to these mega mainframes around the world that will process it for a certain amount of time, and you pay. It's not super expensive, but it might be like tens of dollars per hour or something. But these huge processing things, and if you have all the variations of the physics in these things to compute, it could be rather computer consuming. So you could pay hundreds of dollars to have these huge mainframes around the world process it, and then send you back computations. And I think there's errors within it. So the multi-physics platforms, it was like what Lex Friedman and Stephen Wolfram were mentioning, is that Wolfram is claiming that he's continuing in the path of Gödel's incompleteness theorem and Turing, and just saying that there is no universal mathematics, is that we might have computational explanations for everything, but there is no underlying set of rules that could derive all these various computations, and the computations in one point will seem to contradict with computations at the other point. And the Gödel's incompleteness theorem is like like tough luck. That's how it is. And so Wolfram seems to be in that dynamic, but he's saying, well, we could at least improve how well we can make these calculations, and then some sort of hope that a reverse method from being able to improve how well we make these calculations, that would give us some sort of insight on the larger rules of science in general. So it's a interesting, worthy endeavor. And you could see, it could be like a publicity stunt that like in reality, like no, like Wolfram's not solving any great mysteries of science and mathematics. It's just a publicity stunt for you to buy his software. But even if at that, I would still say, okay, it's still noble.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you can argue that that's like all anyone's doing, right? I mean, this I've got it loaded up on the screen now is the least action principle, and like it's extremely computationally simplistic. All it's saying is that the integral of the path between the deviations from the real path and deviations and the real path, that will be minimized. So it seems to be tautological, but if you already have the full equations of motion, then like if you can describe your system with a Lagrangian, then you've already basically solved it. And this is basically showing that if you have a Lagrangian available, you just have to write some trivial mathematics to be able to derive all your equations of motion, because the information of the equations of motion is already there in the Lagrangian. Anyway, so I didn't need to get too distracted, but technically, I mean, I don't want to be seen to be introducing new math. Like, I want people to feel like they're going back to traditional math. And I think in most cases, it's just sort of a reworking of what other people have said. But I guess I would say that it is possible to have a theoretical framework. It may not be possible to do algebra the way we are accustomed to doing algebra, because our algebra has a particular axiomatic structure that the universe just doesn't share. Because the entire universe, only certain aspects of the universe are continuous, and you can only really do calculus on continuous functions. For those of you who've been listening in the chat. But yeah, this is basically the next step forward. It's not an abandoning of calculus. It's a contextualizing of calculus and of understanding that it doesn't always apply. And if you apply it incorrectly, it will actually be giving you some wrong answers.
I'm feeling strong sensation of tiredness.
I guess that's the effect that math has on people, isn't it?
Well, actually, I was feeling that kind of before the show. Might have been related to the holiday, or like all the meditation I did for the New Year's. But no, I mean, definitely high levels of concentration necessary for math.
Yeah, one of my friends was telling me that he was exhausted after doing meditation, and I was like, how are you meditating? Because after I do meditation, I'm like invigorated and all woken up.
Well, I mean, it could because the day, I mean, it's the New Year's and the element of the day of judgment. So it's sort of just, a day of spiritual accounting that could be taxing to, sort of say stand on trial. Like, okay, because today I stood trial before God because it was the beginning of the year. So it was like, taxing on me to do that. But like, I knew I had to do it. It happens every New Year that I have to, stand judgment before God.
Oh, are New Year's resolutions popular for Jews?
Well, I mean, it's possible the whole concept of New Year's resolutions comes from Judeo theology. Just as a week in review. Well, week in review might come from Judeo theology, but no, I mean, I guess the resolutions aren't necessarily a Jewish custom. You have the Book of Life.
Well, it's a Gentile custom too. I was just wondering if it's like a big thing for Jews or not a big thing. I feel like it is a big thing, and I feel like for a while I thought about them, but then after a while I realized it was only certain types of people that actually do them. It's like the people who sign up for the gym in January and stop going by March.
It's a strategy. I mean, the theology is more blunt and to the point where it's like there's an absolute standard of what's sinful and what's moral and just, and if a person falls short, they're liable to judgment. So like as a strategy, like okay, like you want to be a better person, and like a resolution, and at least like be a little better person, exercise a little bit more, or be a little nicer to people, or any of these various things that it's okay, resolution. I made a resolution. At least I'm going to do this one thing to insert in that I'm going to be a little bit better. But the Judeo theology is more, blunt to a science that like, no, the world stands in judgment, and it's an objective measure of factually an assessment of karma, and unless God has some sort of special mercy on us, due to the special forgiving nature of God, or due to some special thing that we did to cause God to extend mercy upon us, there's a factual element of karma. Then when we sin, there is going to be punishment for the sin, regardless of whether we made a resolution or not.
Oof, that's pretty somber tones. So yeah, if you want to wrap up the show, we've been going for 2.5 hours. You can rest up in preparation for the new year and maybe get a bit of a positive spin on things.
Yeah, and I guess maybe I guess online or some point take the approach to streaming and say, where's Week in Review going, where's Church of Entropy's channel going. Are we just going to keep on doing this and talking about these various issues and hope that's beneficial to both of us, or are we moving in some greater direction? You're going to try to get you over those 1,000 subscribers. We're going to try to eventually reach into a new network of people that various things or activities. So that's fine. If we could talk about that private message, or if you want, we could create a show, or next week, just kind of hash it out. What's the future of what we're doing, and however much your own personal decisions you want to discuss online or offline. But I do think there's potential in the streaming, and just obviously, me and you as post university career people just have a venue to talk about these ideas, and hopefully growing in streaming. I think my streaming is steadily seen improvement, and so Jennifer has to make her own decisions of how much she wants to put herself out there to advance her streaming also. And then if Doooovid advancing and streaming, how exactly would that work for a Week in Review? She just let someone's randomly caught me on a stream and wants to talk, sure, come on Week in Review. If that makes sense for Jennifer to have such a thing. And so we'll see. It's probably worth thinking out and planning. It's getting colder here, so I'm not sure if streaming's better in the colder temperatures, but
I'd say so. Remember Luke Ford's stream with all those people that came on? That was right around Christmas. It might have been Christmas Eve, actually.
Yeah, I'm saying that.
I think it's it'll probably crescendo and peak around, just general stream engagement around elections.
Yeah, so okay, we're introverted personalities in general. They're saying generally on any given night, a person would rather be socially engaged in some meaningful, awesome event, and only select personalities within introverted circles would rather be at home discussing intellectual topics. And so weather probably plays a pattern that also COVID-19 lockdowns, where people that would rather be out with people doing things, socializing, even if they're not advancing ideas in science, which relatively is just a minority part of society that does those things. However, colder temperatures, are they going to be watching the Connors or Roseanne or Hannity, Fox News, and likely that more people will be engaged with YouTube, and also the Brundle type personality that that's just I'm tired of listening to these guys. I'm getting on there and step into the ring. But then also at this point, now you're saying like streaming is a serious activity, and people who do it, you're going to have to invest time into it, and it's kind of difficult because a lot of times in the beginning, you just enter a LARP. It's like Gandalf. It's like, okay, I got this LARP, and then they move forward, and maybe the LARP's not working so well, and they're streaming. Is it like too invested on the LARP? Can they just reinvent themselves in a new, and then they're going to have to build up from scratch, or can they transfer? And these things are difficult, and I still don't think me perfected the entropist cult, or so to say, of having a big tent strategy where new people come in, get interested in what's going on, and benefits them in some small way, that they're immediately learning interesting pieces of wisdom that benefit them in their day-to-day life, and could become part of a larger culture, community of intellectual, spiritual growth. So I mean, I'm not sure if you want to kind of like publicly hash that out, or just think about that, or it's your own personal private decisions that you may have nothing to do, and there might be greater forces. So we'll see, and
Awesome. Look
also
forward to it.
Input from people who watch, and saying that that might also be able to direct the content. You're not just like the 100 links. People like, oh, send me a link. But someone more than just like talk about this link, but more thought out. Kind of like community creating. What direction to take the show, and even what does it mean to create like this international intellectual spiritual community.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you to the chat for participating and voicing your opinions. We'll look forward to the next stream, which will be next Sunday, if not sooner. Pay attention to the channel and click under the video to receive notifications when we're live. I know sometimes it doesn't always show up, so please do. And really look forward to the next one. Thank you so much, everyone, for stopping by. We'll see you all real soon.
Yeah, that's just so to say, a worthless opinion of.
It's so important that she can't be told, she won't be told that it's wrong. And
bringing it back to Church of Entropy and her attack dog, Gandalf the White.
Why don't you learn to shut up and fuck your goddamn logic?
They control the media, and the media is capable of making the people believe in anything.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, we've had these streams, and I've been doing with Church of Entropy, and she's been bringing on new people, and like we did those streams on like stream etiquette. We walked through like the technology.
I have like very strongly negative opinions of the kind of Brundle clique.
Is she trying to garner herself cult prestige by associating herself with a retard?